One area that will set Asia Society Seattle apart from our other centers will be our focus on technology. We are very excited to be partnering with Microsoft. They have been tremendous supporters of our launch, along with Gates Ventures, and they've been fantastic to work with. We will next hear from two representatives from Microsoft's leadership. Corporate Vice President and Deputy General Counsel and Advisory Council member Tom Robertson, followed by a live demonstration by Senior Director of National Security and Emerging Technology, Rob Blair. All of our speaker bios are in our printed program and on our website. We also want to hear from you in the audience, so there'll be two opportunities for Q&A today. One's going to be after Rob Blair's presentation, and then you'll have a chance to do Q&A after our panel discussion, which is coming up. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have microphones. Please wait to be called on and try to keep your questions brief so we can get to as many as we can. This event is being recorded, it's on the record, and the video will be posted on our website. So a big, big thank you again to Microsoft. Please join me in welcoming Tom Robertson.
Thank you, Margaret, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of Microsoft, I want to congratulate the Asia Society on the launch of the Seattle Center. It is a great day for both the Society and the region because we believe that the Seattle Center will be a great contributor to the global network of Asia Society centers around the world and to the Pacific Northwest. Now, Microsoft has got a long history in Asia that dates back almost to its creation as a company. Our first office in Asia was opened in 1986 in Tokyo. I don't know if Bill was there on the day that it opened, but I'm sure that he was there soon thereafter and has returned to the region many times since. In the 37 years since that opening, we now have offices in 18 countries in the region, over 40,000 employees representing 60 nationalities. We also have two of our biggest research and development centers in the region, in India and in China, and we have over 25,000 engineers, a community that's growing month by month. Importantly, we have over 100,000 partners in the region, and by partners I mean small startups, large and small technology companies, nonprofits, governmentally facing organizations, educational institutions. We are absolutely committed to the region because of its importance to the company and because of its importance to the global ecosystems in which we operate. Now, we firmly believe in the importance of understanding and engagement within Asia and between Asia and the rest of the world. The world is, as we all know, increasingly interconnected and interdependent, necessitating strong bridges of collaboration, cultural exchange, mutual understanding, and respect. The Asia Society has been at the forefront of building these bridges since its creation in 1956. The new Seattle Center will be a significant contributor to this aspect of the Asia Society's mission. It will celebrate the diverse set of Asian American communities in the Pacific Northwest, foster connections between them, and promote connections between the region and the rest of Asia and the world. We look forward to unblocking a new level of cultural exchange and understanding in our community here in the Pacific Northwest through the center. Now, the economic ties between the Pacific Northwest and the rest of Asia are incredibly strong. In fact, trade with the rest of Asia is a defining characteristic of our region. And the extensive investment, innovation, and people exchanges that take place between the region and the rest of Asia are of global importance. The new Seattle Center can help foster these economic activities through exchange and understanding, but also through public policy engagement. The Asia Society Policy Institute's focus on climate and green energy, on security and diplomacy, on trade, investment, and innovation, and on technology and public health are of great importance to the Pacific Northwest. And we expect the Seattle Center to tap into the deep expertise in the region on these issues in furtherance of these policy objectives. The Seattle Center can also offer unique value to the Asia Society's network through the region's world-class expertise in the area of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. These tools can be used to advance the mission of the Asia Society, and in turn, the Asia Society can influence how they are developed and applied for societal good around the world. We're also excited about the collaboration between the new Seattle Center and the Northern California Center, with a vision for looking for ways that the US West Coast can come together to advance the mission of the Society. We're strong on our own, and even stronger where we can collaborate. So this is a great start to what we hope and expect will be a long and productive history of the Asia Society in Seattle. Microsoft can't be happier to be a part of this story at its inception, and looks forward to it unfolding over the months and years ahead. I know we and the Gates Venture Organization are super proud and happy to be foundational sponsors of this new center. Now, let me go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Rob Blair, who will speak to the promise of AI generally, and specifically with respect to the mission of the Asia Society, noting that this is super early days and this will unfold over time. We do see AI as having the power to benefit humanity by protecting our health, speeding research and development, and bringing us together across distance and cultures. Now, Rob knows what he's talking about. He joined Microsoft a couple of years ago after 20 years of service at the federal level in the United States. And he's currently responsible for partnering with governments on emerging technologies like AI, quantum, and classified cloud computing. So thank you very much, and let me turn it over to Rob.
Good morning, everybody. Give me a moment while I get this set up. I was just informed by Margaret backstage that now the Dog and Pony show begins. So let me get this all going for us. First, thank you to the Asia Society for the invitation to come and speak. And really on behalf of Microsoft and perhaps the whole Seattle technology community, let me just say welcome to the neighborhood. This is an extraordinary hub of innovation. And we're looking forward to finding new ways to build partnerships with the Asia Society, to build that sort of cross-community connection that, frankly, from my time in the federal government, the federal governments rely upon. When things get really bad between governments, it's that connection across communities that help give policymakers a new set of tools to be able to work through some of the hardest problems. So I've been asked today to talk about AI a little bit more generally, which is rather awkward because I'm going to be talking to the Seattle tech elites, which can be a little bit intimidating to talk about something that they all know very well. But what I'm going to try to bring is for all of you a sense of specificity around a topic which is often talked about very generally. I come from a rural background. I've been working for the federal government for many, many years. I try to stay away from wonky speak. I try to stay away from abbreviations and those sorts of things, which is pretty hard when it comes to generative AI. But here it goes. The way I see it right now, we're in a different era for generative AI. For the first year, and it's not even been a year, I don't know if you all recognize this. Sorry about the feedback. If you all recognize this, but ChatGPT hit the streets in November 30th of last year. So it's not even been a full year yet. But as a society, we've been working through what this might mean for everything that we do, for education, for our workplaces, for national security, for our health. And in doing so, we've learned through the expansion and development of foundational models like GPT-3, 3.5, 4, BARD, that by training them on massive amounts of information across the internet, they've developed entirely new skill sets. They're able to communicate with us naturally, make us feel almost as if they're human. They can produce poetry, they can produce music, they can see, they can hear. But we've been focusing these tools pretty much on the workplace and personal productivity so far. And it's an incredible advantage for folks to be able to work with these as an assistant next to us in all the work that we do day in and day out. However, this new era that we're moving into takes those capabilities and we're beginning to apply them to very specific hard problems. So the one type of, the one word I'll introduce here that many of you may not have heard of is grounding, this idea of grounding foundational models on more specified data. And in doing so, we're able to use all of those cool new abilities, the ability to speak and to read and to see even, and I'll give you some examples of this later on, into some of the world's hardest problems. And in doing so, really speed the innovation process and then supercharge, frankly, economies. What we're going to be seeing over the next decade, in fact, over the next year to the next decade, are countries who are able to really harness AI are going to face competitive advantages to their peers. Companies that are able to do so are going to find themselves working at a speed and a scale that other companies in the same sector that do not have the same capabilities are simply not going to be able to match. I'm going to set aside the structure here and move into some examples, because this is really where I think we can begin to stimulate a way of thinking together about how we can work with these technologies to build a common future. So at Microsoft, we've been taking our generative AI and we've been using it to help fight pandemics. This is one of my favorite set of examples here, because it really speaks to the challenges that we as a society have been facing over the last 5 years. Also, since some of this is in Africa, and I've actually lived in Africa and suffered from malaria multiple times, it's good to see that we're making some progress against a very horrible disease. What we've done is we've taken generative AI and we have trained it in order to recognize environmental DNA that we bring in from the field and compare it to the world's largest databases of genetic information. We've also used generative AI to help recognize disease vectors like mosquitoes based upon characteristics of those vectors themselves. These are pictures taken a week ago, 8 days ago. And I'd like to note that this is a partnership between Microsoft and the Gates Foundation and the Ifakara Institute in Tanzania. And these are some of our local partners using some of the hardware that we've put into their hands to train it to be able to recognize disease vectors and diseases themselves. This allows local communities to be able to build the indigenous knowledge to help protect their communities, and then to share that information with the rest of the world so that as a global society, we're able to work better together. Now, I mentioned that how we train generative AI, but let me show you how we actually use it. I'm going to do one last little wonky thing before we do that. By using this metagenomic AI tool, this training of the AI to recognize genes and compare them against the largest databases in the world, what we found was that we can, when we bring in mosquitoes of certain types, we can actually detect in those mosquitoes diseases that are in the animals that they've been feeding on around them. So even if that mosquito itself can't transmit those specific diseases, we can use them as sentinel devices to be able to see what's going on around. And that has opened up an entirely new world of using this new technology to take people out of the mix, to reduce the need to have people in the field to collect these vectors themselves, because we've been able to automate the process using AI and what we call biological weather stations. Not the most elegant of names, but it's, it kind of looks like a little weather station. This little box here is sitting in the field in Nepal. We also have them in Tanzania, and we're deploying them in some areas of the United States. And inside this, and we'll move to this in the next slide, is an optic that's been trained on the flight patterns of certain mosquitoes. These can stay in the field for weeks, for months, depending on their particular job and their power sources. And what they've enabled us to do, instead of having people in the field, sitting there, being exposed to those diseases themselves, we're able to send them out periodically and thereby reduce both the cost and the human exposure to potential infectious diseases. This is the optic that sits inside of our weather stations. It's about the size, it's a little bit smaller than a credit card. So this is it's not that big. It's about the size of a credit card. And as you'll see here shortly, as a mosquito flies across the optic, it's able to recognize the flight pattern and figure out what kind of a mosquito it is. If it's something that we want to be able to sample, then we can capture it. If it's something, and in this case, this is a mosquito that we would want to capture. If a type goes across that we don't want to capture, still a mosquito, different flight patterns, different feeding patterns, therefore different types of ability to be a sentinel or not, we will just ignore it. Mosquito flies across the optics. If it's a mosquito that we want to sample, a door opens up in the back, a vacuum's applied, and it pulls it in. It takes about 4 milliseconds. See? Watch this. There he goes. And what this allows us to do is greatly increase the efficiency and specificity of our collection techniques, which then reduces the cost and speeds up the process of doing the necessary genetic analysis to figure out what's in the gut of that particular mosquito. You'll see here that our bycatch, if you want to call it that, is very, very small. It's a very, very accurate way to help get out in front of pathogens, to reduce the human cost of keeping an eye on how diseases are being spread. One last thing I'll say on this. We don't just look at mosquitoes and what's inside the bellies of the mosquitoes. When a mosquito moves, if it goes into a new area, for instance, we now have mosquitoes back in Maryland transmitting malaria, that can presage different types of environmental changes. So being able to track both the spread of pathogens as well as the spread of the vectors can help us keep an eye on environmental changes. So let me move from that to how we're using generative AI to transform really, I think, the most consequential sector of our economy, advanced materials. At this point, roughly 96% of all manufactured goods that we all rely upon today have underneath them chemistry and chemicals. That's true for clean water, it's true for batteries, automotives, it's true for paints. The problem is that historically, the development of new materials with specific characteristics that are needed for that particular application has relied upon wet lab work. Wet lab work means work in the real in the laboratory, which is highly human intensive, takes a ton of time, and is very expensive. Then once that wet lab work is done, it's moved into computational chemistry models, which then test the work that's done in the lab, and the circle rinses and repeats. What we've done is flip the whole thing on its head. We went to a wet lab. In this case, I'll show you what one of our customer partner success stories is. We took their in-lab work and we built simulations. We took those simulations, we moved them into Azure, into high-performance cloud, and we were able to then take what the simulation showed and use those to inform work in the lab. And that automation, simulation, and then redirection process has dramatically, really shockingly increased the speed with which this particular customer has been able to improve its research and development pipeline. Look at the last line there. Their R&D cycle went from 10 years to less than 3 months by doing this. It's an incredible advance. Then we took not just our high-performance computing capability, we took generative AI and trained it on the largest databases of chemistry, of chemicals in the world. That doesn't speed up the process. What it does is it expands the intake mechanism. Instead of looking at roughly 1,000 potential candidates every week, they can look at 30 million. 30 million. Imagine what this can do for energy, for batteries. Imagine what this could do for our ability to build new airplanes, what this can do to help with climate change. These are just two examples that I wanted to share with you to begin to get you thinking about how generative AI may help you in your particular sectors and your particular interests. At this point, the Aegis Society is at the heart of what I consider to be one of the true innovation centers of the world. It's an incredible environment here, and I'm honored to work at Microsoft. I love my job. Don't tell Satya I'm going to say this, but there's a lot of other people in the Seattle region who are developing cutting-edge technologies, who want to use those technologies to enable the world to be a better place. And I'm very excited the Aegis Society is beginning to build this community of innovation and creativity. So the examples I'm going to show you here, even though they come from Microsoft, are really only just a bare illustration of what generative AI might be able to bring to the Aegis Society. I'd like to thank Danny Russell for helping me out a little bit and trying to distill the broad scale of the Aegis Society's capabilities and subject matter into 5. I'll just touch on the top 4 fairly quickly. The last one on language education, I would love to be able to talk about. I think that the potential for generative AI to help with improving language around the world is, we're only beginning to start realizing how it can be used. But let me start with the top 4. Danny's group, the Policy Institute, does a lot of work on analysis, so I thought I'd start with those first. This is a capability that the earlier generations of generative AI have been able to. This is Putin. This is not anybody within the Aegis Society's remit necessarily. We've been exploring for some time. I think we all recognize that you can use generative AI to be able to help jumpstart research and development projects. I know my 14-year-old does. I know my 9-year-old does. And so I'm talking with them about how to properly use this in the educational context. But in the professional context, it's a lot more straightforward. So this is a true example. I took this question, I dropped it into Bing Chat, and it came out with this pretty quickly. Now, this is pretty old stuff. But one thing I really love about generative AI is it helps me as a researcher and a writer kind of kick the tires on my prejudices, on my biases, on my lack of information in some areas. I think I'm pretty good on several different issues. But there's always something in my own background, there's always something in my education that I'm missing. This can help me find some of those holes, as long as I'm asking the right questions. It can help me find some of those holes and greatly improve the quality of my research. And this last little one, the translation capabilities of generative AI are truly extraordinary. And in this case, I went to China Daily last week. I just randomly picked an article and I selected it over, went to my personal Bing Chat, it's my work Bing Chat, you'll see my face up there in the top corner with the beard, and dropped it in there, commanding Bing Chat to translate it and to summarize it for me. And you have to forgive my typing too. There we go. Pasted it in there. And I'm going to try to speed through this in the interest of time. And if I screw it up, I apologize. But you'll see the timing. Within the timing here, within a matter of less than 2 minutes, it translated it and summarized it. This is a public capability. This is not some sort of fancy Microsoft private capability. This is a public capability. And it's breaking down linguistic barriers across the research and development community. While here I took Chinese and I translated it to English. Imagine what this could do to open up research and development papers to folks who don't speak English as a first language or Chinese as a first language. It can really begin to close the research and development gap that has been persisting between the North and South ever since. Let's move to arts and culture. Microsoft has been focusing on helping folks around the world expand access to arts and culture for many years now. We've been focusing on 4 different areas: people, places, language, and historical artifacts, each of which I believe has strong import for the Asia Society's mission. With our 4 featured projects, I'm not going to go through them, but the basic intent is we believe and we know that AI can be used and technology can be used to increase access to populations around the world who would not normally be able to meet people from other cultures, would not be able to see artifacts from other cultures, or appreciate the importance for the development of the global community. We can also use it, and we are using it, to help catalog and hopefully reinvigorate languages that are really on the brink of extinction. In this case here, this is Mont Saint-Michel in France, and we used AI to recreate a 3-dimensional model using augmented reality as well for people who would never probably be able to see this in person. I imagine the cultural and architectural artifacts across China, and unfortunately, I've been to China several times. I think that most Americans would be shocked to know how little they understand about the history of China, the importance of Chinese culture, and not just historically, but today. And I firmly believe that generative AI can help close some of those gaps. And then finally, on sustainability. We've got several projects at Microsoft to help support global sustainability. So it's a very significant priority for the company, and I'm only going to bring up a couple here. This is the Global Renewables Watch. It's a partnership that we have with Planet Lab and with the Nature Conservancy to use, I talked earlier about how generative AI can be used to see. In this case, we've used generative AI with the satellite imagery from Planet Lab, and this is an example of an actual interface, to recognize the visual cues from renewable energy projects. There's, in this case, the first thing you'll see is us zooming into several solar panels that are being developed in Europe. The next one you'll see is the AI recognizing not the turbine shape, but the shadows of wind turbines also in Egypt. This is all done in an automated fashion. I think it's tough to really think through and imagine how long it would take a human or a set of humans, the cost thereto, of going through all of this satellite imagery, marking it out by hand, and then processing it into something which is useful for international organizations and for governments to track commitments for renewable energy and for climate change. This last one, We at Microsoft have been developing something called the planetary computer. It's a massive, massive database of databases. I went through and sat and counted each one. There's 123 of them, covering almost every environmental variable that a researcher or a policymaker might be interested in. Petabytes upon petabytes of data, and it all lives in the cloud. This is a fantastic resource if you know how to manage it, if you know how to access it, what each one of these databases do, their limitations or capabilities. But if we want to democratize access to data, this doesn't really work. If you're a student, if you're somebody who's not necessarily comfortable dealing with each one of these databases and has the time and the expertise to learn about them, it's not very helpful. So the team sat down and said, this is a great project for generative AI. Let's see what we can do. So we built an interface using generative AI and began to play with it. And I'm going to I'll talk you through a little bit about what you see, but I think the graphics, the visuals really speak for themselves. Remember, 123 different databases, petabytes of data. We're interested in a question. What you'll see here is within a matter of milliseconds, it's able to find the right database, find the right imagery in the database, explain the limitations and the capabilities of that particular database, and then explain it all to you. Now, it gives you the ability to come back and ask it more questions. Different databases are different, and in this case, it's the same database, but the different imagery, there's no internal way to overlay them except using this tool. So it found a second set of data, overlaid it on the first set of data, and now we can manipulate it to see the changes between the two. One last example. And this is not sped up, by the way. This is all real time. And this is not a commercial product. This is something we did internally just to see the power of this. In this case, we're looking at flooding data from Pakistan. It found the right imagery, and now we're interested in property damage. We don't know which database to go to. It finds the right database, it overlays the database on the existing imagery so we can see what buildings are likely damaged by flooding. My 9-year-old could use this. My 14-year-old could use this. Anybody in the world, and go back to the translational capabilities, anybody in the world who's able to interface with this in their own language would have access to a set of data and knowledge. Well, it just doesn't exist. I'm going to stop here. I'm out of time. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention this morning. I love talking about this. I appreciate all of the work that you're doing here in Seattle. I appreciate the work of the Asia Society, and I'm really looking forward to what we can actually figure out how to make the world a better place together. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for bringing up the lights. We have mic runners for those who are interested or interesting. Really, no questions. I have never done a talk there. Thank you. Gentleman over here, 4th row. Nah, just stand up. I'll hear you. I'll repeat the question.
Hello.
There you go.
Yes, hi. My name is Chuck, and I'm Asia 21 out of also San Francisco. I love all the things you mentioned, and one of the things that, of course, someone that I really care a lot about higher education,
Sure.
since I'm very involved with that. I guess the question is, what does that mean for our next generation? Right? Really, a lot of these things, including what you said, languages, where you can actually really do this very powerful stuff and automatically, in 2 minutes or less, you basically understand all of that. So what's your recommendation? What do you, and of course, many of us probably have kids
Right.
or nephews or
Sure.
nieces and all that. What does that mean for higher education? Thank you.
That's a conversation that is really only beginning. There's some very interesting theories out there about how you have to reverse the learning process, where the teaching is actually being done more outside of the classroom, and then in the classroom, the demonstration of that learning has to take place. The way we're testing students has to change, I think. My kids are in the middle of that, and their school is struggling with how to make this all happen. But I would say on the language side, my kids all speak Mandarin. I don't speak Mandarin. My wife doesn't speak Mandarin. But my kids all speak Mandarin because we think it's an incredibly important way to understand the culture, another culture. I speak French, and there's a Central African language I speak. And because I speak those languages, I was able to get access to people in places that would never have allowed me to have access to them normally and to understand really what was going on. So I don't think that the translation capabilities of artificial AI are ever going to take away that human contact, the cultural understanding, the truly understanding a language brings, but it will help break down some of these divides of just basic communication that I think will have dramatic impact upon the world moving forward. So we're at Microsoft, we're very involved in helping set up curricula for secondary and higher education around AI and how to use AI. But I think that the teaching techniques, we need to have a larger conversation about how tech companies and the educational community can work together to make sure we're getting this right. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Priyasha. I'm a doctoral candidate in the Department of Global Health at the University of Washington. I was recently in Nepal trying to study, not really study, trying to understand the collective vision of our leadership in terms of use of AI in health. And a little concerning, but I felt like my country was not prepared. So when we look at these technological advancements, we're really happy, really proud of what is happening all around the world. But what does it look like in terms of implementation in resource-poor settings like Nepal, where there are so many challenges in terms of infrastructure, in terms of technological resources, human resources, and all of that? So how do you see taking this forward in those settings?
It's a great question, and I've spent many, many months in Nepal. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. I think one of both the challenges and the opportunities around generative AI and some of the tools is that the computational capabilities that it requires are so intense that most people are going to access it through some sort of cloud capability. So I don't think that locationally around the world, accessing these capabilities is going to be too much of a challenge, as long as there's basic internet infrastructure and the applications that are being pursued are not dependent upon latency, so the speed with which things go back. And most of this is not dependent upon latency. I think what the bigger challenge is the educational process and making sure that the people in these areas understand the value of this, are not put off by the fact that it is not necessarily developed in their countries and it is not necessarily part of their existing curriculum, and that we help reach out and build those capabilities in those, we as tech companies. We have a major skilling initiative across East Asia. I don't think we have anything in Central Asia right now, but across East Asia that help mostly, in this case, women and children, build those skills within the tech community. I think that having a similar sort of cooperation for AI and how AI, maybe not developing AI, but how to use AI in different sectors could be a very fruitful relationship. Am I being called off the stage? Is the hook coming? All right, I do one more and then I got to wrap it. One more and then I have to wrap it up. Gentleman there, midway back on the left. Yep.
James Chong from Loeb & Loeb. For all your demonstrations, America's adversary can also replicate that. And what can the national security team do to prevent the enemy from doing that, or to cause America to outcompete against America's adversary and to prevent them from spreading and generating false information?
So the mis and disinformation issue is certainly one that we're very focused on. We're working on several provenance projects to make sure that as imagery, for instance, is being produced, you can tell whether it was generated by an AI or not. This is one of those questions that I face frequently from policymakers, and then I begin to kind of scratch away at what their concerns are. Did you know that Benjamin Franklin wrote a fake newspaper when he was ambassador in France that actually the UK in this case, that actually called the British government to task over things that they didn't actually do. So mis and disinformation has been used by all sides for generations. It's nothing new. I think the frequency of mis and disinformation online will probably increase, but I think our tools for detecting it will also increase. Certainly a concern. I think the big advantage here, though, is that AI is a tool for all. It's a tool that every country can use. So the potential for every country to use it well and to benefit humanity certainly exists. The challenge and the opportunity is for countries to get together and talk about a common set of standards, talk about a common approach forward and how it should be used responsibly, how it should be used ethically and accountably. And that's really a nation-state responsibility. It's difficult for companies to take the lead in that, but we're trying. Excuse me, we worked very closely with the US government and other governments to share best practices about how to improve accountability within AI systems, how to make sure that there's visibility into how this is being used over time. And we've been talking, as I'm sure you've seen recently, about potential licensing regimes. So there's a variety of opportunities for improving, but what we haven't seen yet is a true global effort that all major AI developers should be a part of, begin to develop. And I truly am hopeful over the next year that we'll be able to make that advance. All right, thank you.